you can do this. You talk to colleagues and they say you can do this, you can do that. And all of a sudden you think, oh, so this is how it works.
The problem is for people who go into the business, as I'm sure many and most politicians do for altruistic reasons, to serve their nation and to do good, when you're claiming for things like dog food, for Kit Kats, for nappies, it looks so greedy and so base. And I know I can understand what you're saying. Well, everyone was doing it. It's the culture, and I can understand that. But it won't wash with most people.
No, of course it won't. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling it how it is. I'm not saying it's right, but that culture goes on, and it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
And it's taken this shake-up for us to look back and think, God, that norm was wrong.
OK, The Independent, as I was just saying, more detail about Michael Martin, the Speaker, who is under a lot of pressure and could face a vote of no confidence.
Well, I think that he could possibly be the nearest that the House of Commons is getting to a Speaker getting sacked. And I think that the way that he dealt with Kate Hoey's quite reasonable interjection and a suggestion from her that perhaps it was a waste of money for there to be a police investigation as to how the leak was actually got through. His reaction to that, he has completely misjudged the public mood. And frankly, it seems amazing that the man who is meant to be in charge of fair play, the mother of all parliaments, was more indignant about a leak about the scandal than about the scandal itself.
I think an interesting thing here which will work against Michael Martin, perhaps unfairly, but as the politicians all desperately trying not to resign themselves or find scapegoats in their own parties, it may turn out that, in fact, we all focus on the Speaker and try and get him to resign or quit because we're looking for a head on the block.
But the problem is most people out there don't know who the Speaker is, don't know what his role is, and frankly don't care. He's a side issue, isn't he? But for most people, obviously not in the Westminster Village, but for people out there who are looking at...
For some of the politicians, it might just be an easier head to roll than one of their own.
Yeah, but the point is that nobody will care. If his head rolls, then the voting public will say, well, who is he anyway? We don't really care about him.
Well, at the moment, all of the party leaders are going through this arms race of trying to outdo each other in terms of their self-flagellation. He is the possibly easy target to point at away from them. And even if it doesn't capture the public imagination, it might just capture the political imagination.
OK, Graham, Mark, for now, thank you very much. Well, coming up in the second half of pay-per-view, we'll have intimate details revealed by Katie Price about her marriage to Peter Andre. Stay with us.
What's done is done. It doesn't have to be that way.
Political presentation consultant Graham Davies. Well, we spent the first half of the review talking about the expenses round, so let's move on to some different stories. The Daily Express, don't jail burglars if they're on drugs.
I mean, the Express readers will not like this because I'm afraid most of them are presumably in the lock 'em up, throw away the key category. But actually there's a sensible point behind this because we do take burglars who've got drug problems, we put them into prison, and you'd think, wouldn't you, that when they're in prison, you'd get them off drugs. No, not always. In fact, you can get drugs in prison. And then what happens is, frankly, they don't get off their habit and they come out of prison and commit another crime. This might be a way of breaking that cycle. Instead of sending them to jail, you send them somewhere to get them off drugs. And that might be a more long-term way of tackling the crime culture. I think it's quite creative.
Creative, but it's not going to be very popular, is it, Graham?
Well, Mark's actually understating the case in prison, I suggest to you. It's not just drugs are available in prison, they're often intense drugs warehouses. The problems for these people become even more intense. And in fact, there is no way of breaking any form of cycle by incarceration. The only way of actually breaking it is outside. It's not going to be difficult, it's going to be less popular with the tabloid readers than any other course of action, but it is the only chance of doing something different.
OK, let's move on to The Independent. And those jobless figures that we saw today, the young hit hardest as jobless figures saw by 250,000 there.
I think this is a real reminder. Obviously, the expenses story is enormous and it reflects appallingly on politicians, but at the same time, there's a real human problem going on here. We've now got the highest levels of unemployment since Labour came into office. I don't make this a political point, just as a benchmark. And we've got 1 in 6 18 to 24-year-olds who are now unemployed. It's gone up 250,000 in the last quarter. So whilst we're arguing about oven gloves and bath plugs, there are folk out there who are losing their jobs, and it's a real sign that we need to get back as quickly as we can onto these kind of issues, and the parties, frankly, arguing about what they're going to do to tackle this.
And let's face it, even more perhaps than the NHS, unemployment was an issue that Brown and Blair were really banging on about in the early 90s. If the Brown government fails on unemployment, it fails on everything. And it's worth pointing out that the most frightening figure is the figure for long-term unemployment, which was only last higher in 1998.
Okay, it also talks about, obviously, those thousands of graduates as school leavers who now face a summer of unemployment and how many months, years ahead of that. So, you know, what is the answer? What are the possible solutions out there? We saw the YTS schemes in the 80s. They were disastrous, and there's some anecdotal evidence they, in fact, had a long-term negative effect on those people who did the schemes.
I mean, I got an email today from a graduate saying, can I come into your surgery because there's no course out there, there's nothing that the job centre are offering me which meets what I need. I've got 45-year-old middle-class, middle-aged folk coming in who've never been near a job centre saying when they turned up it had no clue how to deal with their profession and their difficulties. And so actually all the systems and support we've had in place for unemployed need to be rethought because we've got a new kind of unemployed that are being created at the moment.
But it's not even rethought, is it? They need to respond quickly now.
Absolutely.
It's very difficult to have fast response schemes for unemployment. Artificial ones do rarely work. You can only rely on long-term improvement of the economy. I'm afraid that's a horrible but unpalatable truth.
OK. And let's move on to a lighter story now. The Daily Express. William's so sorry for his granny's old dress. That is, of course, Prince William, granny being the Queen.
Well, 109-year-old Catherine Masters noticed that in the birthday card that she's been getting for the last 5 years from Her Majesty seems to be wearing the same dress and, in fact, seems to have the same photograph. So she actually took the bold step of complaining to Buckingham Palace and got a reply. The reply was a call from Prince William himself, who came to apologise and accepted the advice on behalf of his grandmother that probably blue or a white dress might be an improvement in the personal branding of Her Majesty. But of course, the conversation with Prince William went on from there, and she says, he asked me why I was still so fit at my age, and I put it down to a daily tipple of gin until I was 80. Fine advice for us all, I think.
Oh, bless. Very sweet. It's nice that, you know, why would he turn up to this, though? It's nice of him to do so, but why would he go to this this lady's house?
Do you know, I think it's... one, I'd hope it's genuine, but two, I think it also shows the kind of touch his mother had and understanding, you know, not necessarily a good photo opportunity, but, you know, being in touch, being very real. And it's a very nice, real human response. I think there's great hope in that generation of royals.
It seems also to have been a Machiavelli employ by the local Tory MP, Ed Davies, who's doing his best to be the sole popular Member of Parliament this 24 hours.
It's also quite smart of the Queen to send the same card, because, of course, she doesn't age with the picture.
That's very true. No Botox needed for the Queen. Now, three of the papers got the same front story.
A headline to terrify every MP, we haven't had sex for a year. Apparently...
You can't claim for it. There you go.
Apparently not. Love-split glamour girl Kate Price stuck the knife into sex-flop husband Peter Andre. Now, one hardly needs to elaborate on what sex-flop means.
OK, well, you don't need to, but Mark, who is a big fan of their reality TV show, whose name he can reliably inform us is...
It's Kate and Pete's stateside at the moment.
OK, now you obviously have an insight into their marriage,
Yes.
then. Where did it all go wrong?
I do love trash TV, and this is great trash TV. And actually, I've become quite fond of them, watching their various arguments going on. They seem to be very open on camera. They genuinely seem to love their kids, but they do have a fiery relationship. And, you know, I think the real sad thing here is that there's two kids involved. I think there's probably two folk that really love each other. There's a sneaking suspicion I have that they'll hopefully come together, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they come back together again in Hello magazine or something like that.
The story seems to have moved on already in the Daily Mirror. Devastated Katie Price is pleading with Peter Andre to get back together. So, in fact, your prediction seems to be absolutely right.
OK, do you know what? Whatever it is, if they do split up, it's always sad for their children.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
Mark Oaten and Graham Davies, thank you very much for taking us through the papers this evening. Stay with us here on Sky News. All the top stories coming up next.